I'm Joe from As the Joe Flies.
And I'm Leslie from Trips with Tykes.
And welcome back to Disney Deciphered. So on today's episode, we wanted to look at a resort that we thought we had covered, and maybe we did, but if I couldn't find it, that means you, the listener, can't find it either. And it is an important resort to cover, probably the most popular. I do remember in our episode where we talked about our favorite value, moderate, and deluxe resorts, we did name Pop Century as our favorite value resort. So today we're going to talk to you about what you need to know about Pop Century if you're considering staying there. Since I did just mention that, in case you are new to Disney or new to this podcast, Leslie, can you give us a quick reminder? What does value, moderate, and deluxe mean when you're talking about Disney resorts?
So really quickly, Disney has essentially 3 levels of resorts. Deluxe are the fanciest and the most expensive. In the middle are the moderates. And then the sort of motel style, most basic of hotels are the values at Walt Disney World.
That's right. And, the prices go accordingly. We'll talk a little bit about price of Pop Century, at least as of recording in June of 2023 later. One thing to note is I would say that moderate and value resorts are typically closer in price, and with deluxe, there's a bigger jump. But if you're looking for the most economical but best benefit resort on property, Pop Century might be the one to go with. So let's talk about Pop Century. Leslie, why don't you, since you looked all this stuff up, talk a little bit about the history of the resort and what you can expect from the theming and what it looks like.
Okay, so history-wise, Pop Century was the 4th value resort founded at Walt Disney World. It opened December 14th, 2003. As you can probably tell by the date, this was in the wake of the September 11th attacks, which changed a lot of things at Walt Disney World and ultimately shaped the trajectory of this resort. Like all the value resorts, it's a motel-style setup where you enter your rooms from an outdoor hallway, but it's giant. It's 2880 rooms in 10 separate buildings. There's one central building that has the lobby called the Classic Hall, but this resort was supposed to be bigger than this. That's what's crazy. It was supposed to be double this. The resort that we now know as Art of Animation right across the bridge there was supposed to be part of Pop Century, and they were going to truly cover the entire century with these resorts. But because of everything that happened in the wake of September 11th, Art of Animation went a different direction and got its own theming, but they're still sort of sister resorts in terms of how they're set up. So, Joe, why don't you sort of dive into the location and the theming and give a little more background on sort of how this resort came to be and what it is?
Yeah, so Disney says experience the unforgettable fads of the 1950s through the 1990s all over again. From yo-yos, Play-Doh, Rubik's Cube, rollerblades, this resort hotel salutes the timeless fashions, catchphrases, toys, and dances that captivated the world through the decades. The funny thing about this opening in 2003 was, those decades weren't a thing. Like in 2003, no one thought of the 90s as a decade, because we had just come out of the 90s. I mean, I don't know. Gen Xers here, we grew up in the 90s. So that didn't seem like the past to us. But 50s, 60s, you'll see this theming in every single one, each wing of the resort is labeled after a decade, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And, it's really with the 80s where things start feeling like nostalgic for me. Although, Leslie, I'm sure you've seen the things where it's we're when we were 20, Watergate was closer than, I don't know, something was, you've seen those things, basically those your old things. But yeah, Pop Century's theming, it's actually a lot of fun and there's a lot of nostalgia there, giant Rubik's Cube, stuff like that, or as part of the stairwells. So yeah, it's a lot of fun theming, and that kind of masks, or I don't know, I don't want to say masks, but that makes you forget that you're in a motel style hotel. You have to walk outside to get to your room. You're getting in from the outside. The moderates are like this as well, but then when you get inside, it's very bare bones. They have recently refurbished the rooms, but it's still very bare bones inside. And it's not the nicest, it's not even, well, I don't like carpet, but it's not carpet on the ground, but it's not hardwood either. It's this kind of weird floor
laminate
thing. Yes. Thank you. So, while the theming is nice, and that does, I don't want to say put lipstick on a pig. That's too, it's a nice hotel. It's a nice resort. But really, the reason why you're staying at Pop Century, the benefits that you get is it's one of the value resorts with the best transportation situation. So, Leslie, why don't we talk about the transportation you have to the parks? Because when you're staying on site, it's all about staying in that bubble and the convenience.
Exactly. And Pop Century is now one of the resorts on the new Disney Skyliner. So that's how you're getting to Hollywood Studios and to Epcot. You have to go and change at, of course, Caribbean Beach, which is the main central station. But the line goes all the way to the Skyliner station, which is actually on that bridge that connects Art of Animation and Pop Century. So it's a shared Skyliner station. So it's kind of it's the furthest one out on the Skyliner, but it's still on the Skyliner. So that has really sort of changed the value proposition for this resort. Interestingly, this was the value that I stayed at the most, even prior to the Skyliner. I think it sort of is in a little bit of a different spot than the All-Stars. I mean, the All-Stars are the cheapest of the cheap, and that's where you're going to get your big sports groups and cheerleading competitions and things like that. They're staying there. Pop Century is just a teeny bit more pricey, and so I think as a result it sort of has a little bit of a different feel. I mean, that's not to say that you won't get the big groups staying there, but it's always been in a class a little bit of its own. And then now adding in the Skyliner for transportation really does change the value that you get out of it. I mean, you do still, of course, have to take buses to Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom, and the resort still is a little bit farther away than where some of the deluxes and the moderates are located in terms of just drive time and things like that. But ultimately, that Skyliner connection is gold, in my opinion. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, definitely agree. I was worried when the Skyliner first opened that, the lines for the Skyliner were going to be crazy. And it's like you're waiting in a line to get to the park in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. But it really has not borne out. Yes, you will see physically long lines to get from Pop Century to the parks in the morning, but it actually moves pretty quickly. The only time when the Skyliner is an actual issue, and I found that you have to really wait significant amounts of time, and by significant I mean like more than like 10, 15 minutes, is at the end of the night when Epcot closes, like after, well, not Harmonious, but after the Epcot's nighttime show is over, the line for the Skyliner is pretty crazy. Even Hollywood Studios, yes, it backs up a little at the end of the night after Fantasmic and stuff like that, but it's not as crowded as it is. Like at Epcot, sometimes that line runs all the way to like the Beach Club. It's pretty crazy. The addition of the Skyliner really has made Pop Century the go-to value resort for a lot of people. And it also was the first value resort that received renovations to the room. So can you talk a little bit about that, Leslie?
Yes, this was huge for me because, as we know, I'm always complaining about hotels that purport to cater to families that then put them in two double beds. So in 2017, Disney began renovating all of its value resorts and changing the room layouts, which used to be two double beds, which always made me stay away from them with my family. And now what they've done is they've put in a queen bed and then a Queen Murphy bed. So that's sort of the bulk of the room types that you'll find at Pop Century. You have rooms that sleep four. I mean, unlike, of course, the moderates and the deluxes, which sometimes have an extra trundle bed that make these rooms sleep five. These are four max rooms. So if you're a bigger family than that, like Joe's, then you need to get two rooms at Pop Century. But you at least can comfortably sleep four now in the standard rooms. There are some rooms at Pop Century that are just king only. So if you'd rather not sort of have the two queen beds, if you're just traveling as a couple or a single, you can get just the kings, which do give you a little more space around the beds. The bathrooms at Pop Century, like all of the values, are small. Like you're just going to have the one sink. You're going to have a small room that has a toilet and a shower or a tub. So, it's going to be very basic and straightforward, but they have put in like a little bit more shelving, and have a hanging bar instead of like a closet that closes. Most importantly for me, my other pet peeve, there's now a sliding door that closes off the sink area from the room. So it used to be a curtain at all of the values, and now it's a sliding door, and that's game changing, I think, for a lot of families who need to block that noise and light to be able to use the bathroom more fully. So that's sort of the setup in terms of the rooms. There's also a mini fridge and a little coffee maker of some sort. So you have all of the basic things that you need, and the room does look kind of bright and fresh in sort of the IKEA design style, right? Very, it's cute,
Yeah.
but it's cheap in terms of the fit and finish.
That's a great call with IKEA. It has very much, sharp lines, that kind of thing. It feels, yeah, maybe they got their design from Sweden. Also, Leslie, I hope that Disney gave you royalties for, the planning because they obviously consulted on you and put in every single thing in that refurbishment that you would like. I will also speak that, like, as a solo traveler, I like to stay at Pop Century. Like if I'm there, like when I stayed for Marathon Weekend a couple years ago, I stayed at Pop Century, and having that table, that pulls down into the second queen bed, that's very useful when you're like a solo traveler, because I didn't need to pull down that second bed. I had a table where I could work at. I could put my stuff. That's where I set up all my stuff the night before the half marathon so that I was ready to go. And it was a good staging area. And so that flexibility of the room and the room space is very good. And the other thing that they updated in 2017, although I guess maybe they're getting outdated now, is they put in USB ports that you can charge stuff with. Of course, now everything is going to USB-C. So they're going to have to re-update that, but that is very useful as well and convenient. Let's stop here and talk a little bit about the price. In general, like I would say for Pop Century, you'd expect to pay an extra $20 to $30 more than whatever the All-Stars are going for at any given time. On average, I think of this as like a $175 to $225 per night resort before taxes. That's the rack rates. But with the various sales that Disney has been having for this summer through September, I'm expecting to see more sales in the fall. Again, you can get some pretty good rates. I looked for next week as we're recording in June 2023. Pop is $160 if you have a Disney Visa, which you can have the debit card version of it, so you don't even need to apply for a credit card as long as you have a Chase bank account. That's $160 per night before tax. And in August, it's like $144 per night before tax. So it's a really great deal as far as Disney deals go, especially because we've said this a few times, but if you look at the resorts, at least the 3-4-star resorts that are off-site, you are going to end up paying around $150, especially after you factor in like resort fees and things like that. Like even at the Wyndham Lake Buena Vista, like the one near Disney Springs or something like that, you're paying about the same, and you have to worry about paying for parking, which you don't have to do at Disney resorts now. So definitely worth checking out because you do get some benefits from staying on site. Let's talk about those perks before we get to the rest of the resort, just because it fits in here. What perks do you get for being on site, and kind of what are those worth compared to off-site?
Sure. I mean, of course, you're sort of in the Disney bubble, and that's a perk that can't really be quantified or explained. But the biggest actual perk is early entry into all of the theme parks, 30 minutes early each morning. That's just huge in terms of getting a jump on the crowds if you can get yourself up and out early. And then, of course, you also get paid Lightning Lane booking privileges at 7 a.m. That's the other big on-property perk. So, people are paying big bucks 3 and 4 and 5 times a night, the price of Pop Century, staying at some of these deluxe resorts, and you get those same things. So, I mean, that to me is, I would always stay in a Pop Century versus an off-property at this point, at least with my family of 4, if it's just the 4 of us traveling, because having that Disney bubble, having those couple of extra perks to make your strategy work for the day, and then having the Skyliner, that's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So let's talk about your food options if you're at the resort. So they just have a food court. I think the name is the Everything Pop food court, and there's like 4 or 5 different stations where you can order. You can just get the typical fare that you would expect: burgers, pizza, chicken fingers, salads. There's a pool bar as well. I found when I've been staying at Pop Century, a lot of times I'll just do mobile order, and then I'll just pick up the food so that it's ready. But you can also wait for it. I also, there's a lot of tables outside, and well, I guess the last time I stayed there was in January, so it wasn't like 100 degrees out. So I would just mobile order to go, grab my food, and then we'll sit at a table outside and enjoy just the nice weather. So not like the most exciting food options, but definitely economical, and you can get what you need to feed your family without much trouble. What about the pools, Leslie? What are we looking at here?
All right, so the big main pool, which is right behind the lobby building, is called the Hippy Dippy Pool. It's right next to the 1960s building, as you can probably imagine. So all of the decor is very hippie themed, Summer of Love. Guess it fits in for me as a San Franciscan, but it's bold, it's huge. None of the values have got any of the sort of extra features like a water slide or like a water playground. It's just a big pool, but it feels better, I guess, than what it actually is, just because the theming is so fun. The music that's playing is fun. It feels like a vibrant pool scene. And so it's definitely, I think, the most popular of the value pools at any of the resorts at Walt Disney World. And I always have a lot of fun when I have gone there. And I know it was a hit with your kids a couple of years ago, Joe, when you guys stayed there. So that's kind of the big draw. There are two smaller pools. There's one in the 1950 section called the bowling pool, and then in the 1990 section called the computer pool. So you have those smaller side pools as well if you kind of just want a quick dip near to your hotel room.
So not like no frills, but honestly, kids don't need frills for the pool. They just need someplace cool to go. So that is the pools. That covers the main aspects of Pop Century that you need to think about. But let's talk about, Leslie, as we do with all of our hotel overviews, why should you or should you not stay at Pop Century? What are the reasons? Although I feel like we have pretty much shown our hand already about why you should stay there.
Yeah, so I guess I already said best of the value pools, in my opinion. You've got that Skyliner access. Those to me are why I end up staying at Pop Century more than any other value. I mean, the location being a little bit better than the All-Stars, and sort of also the improved chance of being away from the traveling groups of teens. Although I shouldn't start mocking those traveling groups of teens, because I'm now about to enter that stage. My kid is going to be in the traveling groups of teens. So let's just hope she's of the well-behaved variety, she and her friends, going forward. But yeah, I think in terms of that, the Skyliner location and then just the theming and the pools make it a lot of fun, and always the one that I look at. I also should say, I sometimes find it's more available than a lot of other resorts. Sometimes when I'm looking last minute, there's still Pop Century most of the time. And that's why I've ended up staying there more than any other resort. I think just the size of it, the sheer size of it, and the fact that so many of the room types work for my family, it's available.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. In terms of why not to stay there, the rooms do feel like a little bit tight. They don't feel, and it's just really, I think, again, IKEA is the perfect way. I have a lot of IKEA furniture, by the way. I'm not hating, but it is just very no frills, very basic, bare bones. Does feel a little bit like a hotel, motel accommodations. And so if you want something nicer, if you want something a little bit more comfortable, maybe this is not the place to go. I will note, though, that Caribbean Beach still has the air conditioners that are attached to the wall thing, whereas Pop Century, this is very random and esoteric, but Pop Century has central air conditioning. So it feels cooler than, or less issues, I guess is the way to say it, with that. So that's nice. But other than that, at the moderates, the rooms are going to feel nicer, a little bit more comfortable. Obviously, the deluxes is going to be the next level above that. So if you are a no frills kind of person, Pop Century is the place for you. But if you need any sort of creature comforts, you may want to avoid it. And if your kids, I think all kids will enjoy all pools, but if you would rather them have a slide, a better water play area, that kind of stuff, then you might be wanting to look at Pop Century.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the only time I wouldn't stay there is if I was planning a real Magic Kingdom centric vacation with my family. I mean, my kids now like all of the parks, and we, actually are probably spending more time at Hollywood Studios and Epcot. So that Skyliner station makes sense for us. But I think some people, especially in maybe the preschooler, young elementary age, are really focused and fixated on Magic Kingdom, and it's far from that. So that's something to keep in mind.
Oh, actually, you bring up another good point, which is There is only one bus stop, and the resort is, we complain about places like Caribbean Beach or Coronado Springs having like 6 bus stops, but that means you have to walk less to get to the bus stop. If you end up in like a further room, and like I haven't quite figured it out yet, Leslie. This is the first resort overview we've recorded since Disney World switched to just having resort view, water view, theme park view as like the room designations. For Pop, it's just standard or preferred. And so you kind of you want to request a room through touring plans that's closer towards the central areas in order to, not have to walk as far to the bus. But if you get, a room that's further away, then that's a pretty long walk every day.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, Joe. Well, let's close this Pop Century episode out with our traditional Disney do or don't. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so my Disney do is very simple. We mentioned it, but we didn't talk about it very much. But Art of Animation, the sister resort, is right across Hourglass Lake from Pop Century. The Skyliner station is in the middle in like an island or a land bridge connecting the two resorts. Definitely do check out Art of Animation while you're staying at Pop Century. Number one, the theming is very cute and it's nice to walk around. But number two, especially if you're on a longer stay, their food court has different foods, a little bit more international options. I think it's called Landscapes of Flavor or something like that. So you can definitely mix things up and get different food if you're sick of eating the same stuff from the Pop Century food court every single day. So check out Art of Animation. It's right there. It's a quick walk over, after you come back from the parks, or maybe you're too tired then, but definitely check it out. It's worth seeing and it's fun. The reason why I prefer Pop Century's rooms over the Little Mermaid rooms, which are the same type of room but Little Mermaid themed at Art of Animation, is one, Art of Animation is more expensive, and two, the Little Mermaid rooms are always going to be the furthest walk from the Skyliner buses and things like that. So stay at Pop Century, save some money. It's going to be the same level of comfort, but then walk over to Art of Animation and enjoy the theming over there.
Totally agree.
All right, well, that does it for our Pop Century overview. If you have stayed there, please let us know. DisneyDeciphered@gmail.com, at WWDeciphered on Twitter, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, Disney Deciphered. Of course, you can find us on YouTube now, youtube.com/@DisneyDeciphered. Leslie, where can people find your work?
I am tripswithtykes.com and at tripswithtykes everywhere on social media. What about you, Joe?
You can find me at AsJoeFlies on social media, and also email me, josephchung@travelmation.net, if you're looking to book a trip. But yes, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. And other than that, Leslie, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I'll see you booking a last minute trip to Pop Century.
Thanks, Joe.